Okay, can we start? Okay. So yeah, just keep your notes with you, and if I will move to the other part of the issues today in terms of the global leadership. Yeah. So just in case you want to include in your notes, yeah, you can just put in your notes. So I will ask your writing or your summary by the end of this class. Yeah. So just to kind of evaluate to what extent the lessons that you get or how you see actually the lesson or the US foreign policy from your reading and also from your discussions. So I will focus more on leadership, basically in terms of to what extent that actually U.S. foreign policy can be a lesson for leadership in terms of policy making and maybe also beyond policy making. Yeah. And these four presidents that I will mention or elaborate a bit in the upcoming minutes. So they are basically they do have similarity in terms that they face kind of crisis in terms of the global crisis, also national crisis, and we will see in how they kind of balance in terms of their idealism and pragmatism, and this is important aspect in foreign policy making. And we will see the lesson in terms that they are not the perfect men or humans, but despite their imperfections, so they have commitment to learn. Just all these presidents actually evolved during their presidencies and adapt with geopolitical challenges, differences, and also domestic politics dynamics, and also how they kind of reflect on their own values. The first president, so last time we finished with Kennedy, right? So this is Lyndon Johnson. So, so Lyndon Johnson's become presidents because of the assassinations of President Kennedy, and one of the hallmark or the title that can see in terms of Lyndon Johnson's in terms of that we can learn in terms of the burden or the problem of overreach. So if you are a global power, you have the resources at your hand, you have kind of tendency or maybe there is temptations to what's it, intervenes with everything. And this is actually the problems that being faced, the challenge that being faced by Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam War, and the dangers of overreach actually constantly become the problem for leaders or particularly superpower countries. So Johnson's actually escalate the U.S. involvement in Vietnam after the incidents of Tonkin resolutions. Yeah, so there's torpedoes that actually in the Gulf of Tonkin that hit from the southern Vietnam, and this flame that is being launched by Northern Vietnam Force or Viet Cong, and from that the U.S. actually escalates sending troops to Vietnam. Before they only supporting the governments of Saigon, Northern Vietnam, through kind of like a consultant. So they become the military consultants how to defeat communists of Ho Chi Minh, something like that. But Johnson's actually starting the escalations by sending troops, military forces directly to Vietnam, and this is actually the challenges or problems that being faced by Johnson. Why? In one hand, he has the idealism to how to stop communism influenced, and because he see the importance of Southeast Asia. If Vietnam's fall, it may actually this domino effect that will bring communism or dominance in the regions. So, but at the same time, actually we learn from the tragic actually of Johnson's, that how these idealistic commitments actually required or force him to actually go beyond that, actually spend not only resources in terms of money for other resources, but also American lives, that actually create disability, kind of political protest in US itself. So this is the other dimensions that we are moving in terms of how foreign policy cannot be separated from domestic policy. So when you have clear visions in terms of defeating communism, but because you are actually, due to your commitments, actually use the capabilities or forces or resources that actually beyond your capabilities, it's create problem at home. Just like imagine that, okay, you have okay, I'm a father myself, husband myself, and sometimes, okay, I want to make, or say I want to make my family comfortable, right? So I know your fathers do like that. Okay, I want to send my daughter to maybe expensive school, bring, or say a good houses or something like that. So this is a good, or say, motivations. They send you to this place also maybe with these intentions, but yeah, sometimes these good intentions need to be balanced. That if how to send Bruce here will not sacrifice Bruce's brother or sister, that oh, we only have one, or said we only have enough money to send one students to Java for school, and then we get all everything, our money Bruce, and then create maybe in a house that have problems. Brothers, oh, we don't have enough food to eat because all money is going to Bruce in Cikarang. So this is the things that a simple example, but very much also represent of how foreign policy is. So, and this is if we're using Henry Kissinger. So this is actually the vice presidents after Lyndon Johnson's and during Nixon. So the important of, they call it pragmatic idealism. So how to keep your goals achieved, but have to see whether finding the pragmatic or practical tools to achieve that. Because he suggests that yeah, foreign policy should be guided by noble goals or noble principles or values, right? Because if you say to your people, if you are now foreign minister or president, that oh, we will invade Malaysia because we want to become rich countries because we are powerful or something like that, no one actually will support your goals, because they will see that that is not a noble goal, right? To invading other countries for money, for those wealth, something like that. But yeah, you need to, even like you are forced to invade, let's say, quote unquote, Malaysia, you need to put that into a noble goals that we are actually, just like during Quran, so President Sukarno, so we are anti-neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, and we saw that the Federation of Malaysia at that time is actually representing the region of colonialism, something like that. So, and that's actually moved whole countries in the one direction. So that's foreign policy is all about, right? But it's also need to being, what you call it, revise, recalibrate if you using kind of tools. Sometimes you need to check again because maybe the measurement is not correct with the realities because the situation changes. Your countries, the people maybe changes. We are very excited in the elections, but then maybe there are other priorities now. So this is the things that you may need to understand. But the other learning lessons from Johnson is also, regardless that Vietnam is actually a strategy for US, but Johnson is a president that very much concerns most on the internal, the domestic issues. So this is not very much a foreign policy president type of foreign policy. While he failed in Vietnam because of his idealism, but is kind of falling short about this support in back home. But he managed to actually compete about this civil rights acts that actually during this time, Martin Luther King, so a lot of actually progress that actually can be attributed to President Johnson's. So again, Johnson's can be seen as the can be taken as how idealism can not always end up in a good way, because if you are not balancing idealism with practicality, you will fall in this trap that you just pursue your noble goals, but actually you have no capability or it's backfire to your authority. Next is a very quite different. The second after Lyndon Johnson's U.S. or American citizen actually go to another pendulum, finding more very much kind of pragmatic presidents, Richard Nixon. And with Kissinger actually is vice, or sorry, not vice president, but is actually the State Department's leader in the State Department. Yeah. So, so the important things that we may learn from Nixon is actually compared to Johnson's very idealistic. Nixon is quite very pragmatic. That remarkable achievement by Nixon actually, he can see through that we need to find the best possible outcome regardless this kind of the ideological battle at that time. So we the geopolitics is we have Soviet Unions, we have China communists, and we have US, and let's say there's a non-block. Let's say just ignore from the non-alignment movement for now, but let's say we have two communist bloc. Used to be seen as one, Chinese communist and Soviet communist, and so previous presidents see that, oh, communist is our leader, our enemy. But then Nixon actually managed to see clearly that Chinese communists, China communists, and Soviet communists, Stalin and Mao actually go along together. So how to find leverage in this situation? So Nixon actually used a strategy to use the term, they call it rapprochement. So US actually approached China to make to kind of distant, to make this communist bloc kind of separated or divided. So how actually Nixon's visit China and bring China closer, and then put actually Soviet as the only enemy. So while this is very important kind of strategy or tactics, but the other things that we need to also learn from the Nixon presidency, because Nixon is the one of the president that we impeached. Yeah, anyone know or ever heard about? Yeah, what about this, Chris? Yeah. Watergate, okay, later on, please check Watergate scandal. So basically, so Nixon actually using spies or the state intelligence to monitor this the opponents of the during the elections. Yeah, during the elections, Nixon actually using or said yeah this state apparatus to support this is something that familiar, yeah, but okay, let's not do that. Okay, but yeah, so Nixon actually full of scandals in some that how actually and very important. If you Google Nixon's and maybe find in the YouTube one of the viral, let's say if you can use the term now, viral is there's a statement from Nixon said, I'm not a crook. Because at that time, people actually see Nixon as a crook. So crook means that actually is someone who cheating. Well, although he actually managed to create achievement in geopolitical aspect in U.S. Foreign policy, but because one, that's the scandal, and the second thing is because he used that is not in terms of transparent approach. So yeah, this is probably the challenge if we are doing strategy. Yeah, so if we tell everyone that oh let's approach China to make sure that China will let's approach Mao to make this Soviet bloc or this communist bloc weaken. So if you pronounce that, so they Soviet or China will know or publics will know about that, right? So it may not go as you want the outcome that you want to get, right? So let me use the other example. For example, like we have okay, I have a problem with Gabriel and Abel, and we have Bruce here. So I know that both of them are okay, my enemy, let's say. But after some time, I know because we have a different ideology or something like that. Yeah. Okay. And but I know that after sometimes they start. Fighting each other, although they have a lot of disagreements. So I approached Bruce, although I know that maybe if my family know that I become friend with Bruce, my family will agree with me, right? But I know that I need to approach Bruce because will bring me advantage. So Nixon, this is what Nixon do. Actually, Nixon's approach China without kind of informing or being transparent to U.S. publics. So it bring a question. You said we are fighting against communism, but why you are coming to China? Why you are sitting together, talk together with Mao or something like that? So this actually raised also questions in the public because so who is our enemy now? Because you said we are the communists are bad, China or Soviet are bad, but why we are doing good with them? So this is maybe the challenge of how, in one way, we want to achieve strategic goals, but in strategic goals, sometimes we will do kind of a little bit contrary to our maybe principles, right? Because your principle is okay, democracy, human rights, but then you are now go hand in hand with someone who violating human rights, for example, for a strategy goal. So this is some things that challenging because how to make sure that your goals achieved. But if you too honest with your approach and goals, it may fail. Yeah, okay. Because then, like when I approach Bruce, I ask my family first. Okay, can I go to Bruce's house? So my family, oh no, you cannot go there. But I know that if I didn't go to Bruce's house, so I will have a problem. But if I go to Bruce's house, I may get some benefit. But my parents will angry with me, right? Okay, so some people in management or some say that better say sorry than it's better ask or say sorry rather than ask permissions, right? Okay, so, I think this is what you do, right? Okay. Kalau dilarang oleh orang tua, misalnya nggak boleh naik gunung atau apa, dah mending nanti naik gunung dulu, pulang nanti minta maaf, karena kalau minta izin, if you ask permissions, okay, so this is how actually Nixon and Kissinger actually see, because they are Kissinger is very much he's a professor in international relations. He's know geopolitics, so this is how Kissinger see that geopolitics is actually changing. We need to approach China. Approach China, they are communists, yeah, but this is geopolitically really gain advantage and weaken the Soviet bloc by bringing China closer. So, but this actually may not be nice to hear in some of their public, because now we are working together with communists. Maybe now we have now we are working together with maybe fundamentalists. Okay, so it's Middle East, yeah. So this is also challenging. Sometimes U.S. actually supporting dictators because for the strategic goal, and it's not always end with in a good way. So this is how Nixon did. So while Nixon actually gave us lesson in terms of secret diplomacy and strategic innovation, because this is very innovative at that time. The world that used to be seeing that just communists and capitalists, West and East, seeing that, oh no, that's not that simple. Actually, the communist is actually really diverse also. So then, so this is the innovations that being approached. But and using the secret diplomacy to find common ground with the Chinese government. But there's a trade-off also. So this is the things that how you can achieve diplomatic goals, but without actually sacrificing your public support, because diplomacy also needs transparency. But if you too transparent, too honest, then diplomacy may not work. So this is how we need to balance on that. And the third on Jimmy Carter. Okay. So from choosing very much pragmatic presidents, Americans actually now choosing the idealist presidents. So Jimmy Carter's actually aim to kind of recast or reformulate U.S. foreign policy based on ideals, based on what they stand for, democracy, human rights. Basically, kind of back to the ethical guidance that we should conduct foreign policy based on ethical principles. So, yeah, and this is something that may be radical also. The way of before, particularly if we learn in IR, the theory realism. And dominantly at that time, foreign policy need to ground it in some of the strategy considerations, right? So if you're, I don't care whether you are black or white. If you, I don't care that if the cat is black or white, as long as the cat can catch mouse. Jadi ya nggak peduli mau hitam putih, tapi kalau kucingnya bisa nangkap tikus, ya saya akan pakai kucing itu ibaratnya. So okay, that's very pragmatic. Jadi mungkin ya nggak peduli mau apa ideologinya apa, something like that. But Jimmy Carter actually foreign policy need to be based on ethical principles, human rights. So what we are doing in the world, what we are influencing in the world should be based on what Americans believe in democracy, human rights, free trade. So, and this is why that there's kind of tensions also within U.S. foreign policy from the pragmatics and also idealistic, because those spectrum exist. Yeah. So now we see Trump, but American is not only Trump and supporters. So hopefully we can see more broader on that. But the thing is, yeah, idealism. Back to the just like in during Johnson's, there's some practical limits that may not be easy to achieve. Just what you call it, preaching democracy, human rights. So you need to have ability to enforce that. So Carter cannot stay longer. Actually, yeah. So I think Carter is also only one term of presidency, and he until the last day of his life, yeah, basically he still committed to this ethical approach of foreign policy. So if you are very much want to understand in what ways ethical idealism influence President Carter is one of the examples of how foreign policy are being guided through the implementations of ethical principles. But there's incidents also in 1979 during the Iran revolutions, and this is also kind of the challenge from, also become the challenge for Carter, how you deal with the kind of enemy that may not be able to talk with. So at that time, Iranian revolutions, let's say consider that Iran actually the revolutionary power that they don't know, it's different with other forces. So you cannot deal with the revolutionary, but they actually controlling the countries, and actually there's an incident of hostage in the U.S. embassy at that time. So this is one of the big question from the public in terms of how Carter managed to navigate these problems. Okay, so and lastly, Ronald Reagan. So Ronald Reagan actually can be seen as the president that end or not end the Cold War, but the one who start the ending of Cold War. Because the Cold War is not ending during Ronald Reagan, but actually Ronald Reagan actually the one who can be seen that he's the one initiate the ending of the Cold War. So what make Reagan unique? Yeah, he's actually not a politician. He's not also a foreign policy expert. He's not a military person. Anyone guess what the background of Ronald Reagan? Businessman? No, not businessman actually. It's actually movie stars. Okay, yeah. So he's a Hollywood star. Okay. Yeah, he's very popular. Just maybe like just Trump nowadays. People vote him because of his charisma, is the way he talk, representing of how the tough type of cowboy or something like that. But the interesting thing is Ronald Reagan, for someone who are coming from outside this policy making table, but he actually can be seen as the fast learners. So he learns quickly in terms of foreign policy, and he combined resolve with restraints also. So one of the interesting thing of Ronald Reagan that showing tough approach with Soviet, but at the same time he actually conduct a lot of diplomacy, a lot of agreements actually reached during Ronald Reagan's era. Reagan actually have two-term presidency achieving that actually started the end of the Cold War. Let me just highlight it. I think if I'm mistaken, summary 3 or 4 will focus on the evolutions of Ronald Reagan presidency. How in the beginning it's very much like Trump that either with you with us or against us. Okay, it's American first, you are the enemy, something like that. But later on, actually, in the second presidency, he's very much a person who can find compromise or find solutions or makes it's not just ideological battles but also find a concrete agreements on that. Let me just emphasize in terms of how actual. So I move a bit from U.S. perspective now with seeing from both perspective of U.S. and Soviet Unions. So Cold War start as an ideological conflict, economic system, or also geopolitical rivalry between these two great power. I think it's mistaken here, Mahis actually mentions that how military tools or approach very much dominance in the containment strategy or even Soviet also approach. So military Cold War basically we talk this is as a Cold War, but Cold War is also some things that emphasize of the use or the increasing use of resources for military purpose. They come up with deadly weapon, nuclear, so that's happened during this arms race also. But both countries or both leaders actually learning throughout this Cold War, seeing that actually military approach or military what you call it strategy is actually unattainable. So some things that let's say like this. Okay, you know that to protect your family, I need to have I have follow-up at my house, for example, yeah. So I have follow-up at my house because if I don't have this sword or this facilities, okay, people will come to my place. Maybe some of you coming from that place, jadi mungkin ada dari kalian dari daerah-daerah yang mungkin sedikit berbeda, yang keamanannya kalian tidak bisa. So you cannot rely on calling police or something. So you need to rely on yourself, right? So basically, people in that particular tribe or communities, they still bring their own weapon, right? Because they know that this is the one that will protect me and protect my family from any threat or any enemy. And this is what happened in the beginning of Cold War. And understand, okay, Mercedes is not enough, so maybe I need to bring pistol now because others actually having pistol right now. Oh, pistol is not enough. Now I need to come up with M16 or something like that. So because they are with M16, but now I need to have more machine guns or something because they are. So and this is what happened arm race during the Cold War. But the leaders actually understand that the arm race is something that they call it massive destruction, massive mutual assured destructions. They reach at a certain point that actually their weapon is not only will kill or destroy the enemy, but actually also can able to destroy the enemy and everything, not just once but twice or maybe 3 times. So means their nuclear weapon now is actually not only able to destroy your enemy, but actually destroy the whole world in twice, 2 times. Jadi bukan hanya menghancurkan musuh, tapi juga menghancurkan dunia itu bukan hanya sekali, bisa jadi 2-3 kali masih cukup itu senjatanya. So this is the kind of the paradox that happening during the Cold War, that they know that they are forced to always improving their weapon system, their power, but also they know that if they use their military power, if they use their nuclear, it's not only that the enemy destroyed, but everything that they fight for is also destroyed, right? Their family, their freedoms, their countries, their peoples, also destroyed. So this is the interesting paradox that actually help Cold War keep cool or cold because both leaders understand and they put restraint on themselves. Because if I go too much, I went too much or to be more aggressive and we start having nuclear war between our side. So it's not only that Soviet Union will destroy, but actually our home, our life, our children, our freedoms, everything is actually being destroyed. So this is actually the way Reagan actually see why he started the diplomatic discussions with the Soviet to reduce how to, okay, we still enemy, okay, we don't need to come together, you don't need to like me, I don't need to like you, but we know that if I use all my weapon and you use your weapon, everything is destroyed. So let's agree to, okay, reduce some of this weapon, I reduce 5, you should reduce 5, I reduce 6. So this is how the discussion of the diplomacy during Reagan time. So again, Cold War start by seeing enemy as something that need to be destroyed, but throughout the years, both actually understand that you need to work with your enemy because if you cannot find way to work with your enemy, so it's not only your enemies being destroyed, but everything is destroyed. So they still they come up to this bigger picture of understanding that you don't need to be or say friends, but you still need to come up with solutions together. We need still to cope with. So probably this is the lessons that Reagan pick up very quickly, and despite his very cowboy approach, tough guy, he actually managed to find a lot of funny deals with Soviet Unions that actually ending started the ending of the Cold War. Okay, so so yeah. Okay, so that's okay. Any questions or comments?
Sir, I just want to ask between the four presidents, which one is your favorite of the foreign policy approach?
Okay. Oh, so hard to say that. Okay. So I'll keep it at the end of the semester. Yeah. So just okay. Take a look on that because I just mentioned some part of that. Yeah. I wrote my paper with my what's it my. My semester paper during my doctorate degree on distance. So yeah, I have a bit on distance. But yeah, there are a lot of things that actually interesting to elaborate more. Yeah. So again, that they are not the ideal in terms of what you call it, the leaders that all ideals there, but the things that we may want to learn is actually so that they do have limitations. They have a lot of limitations, but how they still manage to learn, to adapt with the situations, improve, okay. Back to the yesterday motivation, growth mindset. Okay, so yeah, so I mean that this is actually the things that we may pick up from this different president. They face different challenges, but several point that for analytical purpose, yeah, in terms of that how domestic aspect become more importance in the foreign policy making. You cannot just focus on foreign policy or world while you have a problem at home. So some say that a good foreign policy starts at home. So if you do have your home in order, so that's may make your foreign policy easier. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah. Any other? Okay. So yeah, don't forget to give me the your notes later on. Yeah, but okay, let me just last things. This is related to your essay. Okay, you know why I use this paper? Okay, so I have AI help me in formulating this lecture. So saying that means that for your final essay, yeah. So I will assume that everyone will use AI. If you will not use AI, it's okay too. So, but I will assume that you will use AI. So my request to you on your paper, final paper, yeah, on your final paper. So it's only for this class, yeah. So maybe other class will have different rules, and this is okay. So I want you to attach to your paper later on about the prompt that you use in formulating your paper, yeah.
Prompt?
Your prompt, your questions, the questions that you ask AI
yeah.
to help you with, yeah?
Yeah.
So for example, like, okay, so you start with, okay, I want to write about Nixon's, and then, okay, and then what questions, and later on you add more, So just like if you ever experience of reading a quantitative paper using program, like a statistical program or coding, something like that. So beside their paper, they always attach their code sources. So yeah, okay. So what kind of code that you use to come up with this graph, this analysis? The same thing with AI, yeah. So that's experiment. So this is experiment actually. I don't know whether this is good or not, but I will assume that okay, everyone here is free to use AI tools. But the thing is, I want you to be transparent. What questions or prompt that you are using to help you. So make like attachments on your paper. If you choose not using that, that's also okay. I mean, that, oh no sir, I want to really not touching AI at all, so that's okay. Yeah. But if you, okay, so please attach that, yeah. Just give you example. So yeah, these are things that I also still learning. So this I'm kind of combining. This is the resources from Henry Kissinger's on what's the book paper? Okay, and Joseph Lieberman's on why Americans leadership still matters, and Henry Kissinger's on pragmatic idealism and balance of power, and Simon Sarfati, I think one of the books is about the Transatlantic Alliance, but I formulate those resources in the narrative style of Doris Goodwin. So Doris is actually one of my favorite historians. She was historians that worked together with Lyndon Johnson. She wrote a lot she wrote a biographical several books of Lyndon Johnson. She worked in the White House, but she has a class actually about leadership class. So I like the way she explained about the lesson of leadership. So I asked basically, yeah, this is a long process, but at the end I asked AI, basically my co-pilot, to formulate the lectures in the style of Doris Kearns Goodwin. So okay. So let's try. This is for every one of us. It's the stage of learning. So for your final paper, I allow you to use AI, but make sure you attach your prompts. You need to go beyond just one prompt. So the purpose of my assessment is actually I'm not just seeing your end result of your essay. Yeah, I'm sure that I will enjoy reading your essay, but I also want to see your process actually, why you come up with the essay, what question actually make you interested, and how you respond to the AI that they give you this answer that you you revise your questions, or you add, or you maybe change, or something like that. Okay, so let's experiment together. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, and don't forget to give me the note. Don't forget on the summary 3 for next week, and we'll meet again. Oh, yeah, next week we still meet on Friday. On Friday we have guest lecture actually, but not outside. So we have other lectures will come to the class to deliver material. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
some of us don't have pencil and paper. Okay, like this Friday will be
So today, basically, right? Today, I want to have a paper. Okay, so if you don't have it with you right now, go back to your dorm or find here. Okay, so go just one sheet or 2 pages, write it down. Yeah. So I don't accept any digital format. Yeah, for today, just pen and paper or pencil and paper.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.